Hi all, glad you made it. Okay, so it's 1300. Let's get going. Couple announcements first, or I guess we'll take roll. I see Hudson McGee, Joe Klein, David Betancourt, Colton Schmidt, Gage Bellis, Jackson Hutchinson, Carolyn Oppiger, Ben Davis, Stephen Hess, Evan. Is that Evan Zverev? Could you please unmute and let me know if you are in fact Evan Zverev?
Yes, sir.
Ah, the elusive Mr. Zverev. Okay, we should. I'll send you an email. We'll get that together. Welcome. Glad you're here. Okay. Who else? Thomas Green is here. Connor Caffrey. Burt McCarroll. Okay. I don't know. Is Mr. Curtis here? Apparently not. Bruce Ross? No. Has anybody heard anything from Plas Silsby? I'm wondering if they're still with the academy. Anybody know anything? All right. Well, I'll figure that out through other channels. Okay, so let's see all your faces for a while. Hey, there you are. Great. So how is everybody doing computer-wise? Or do you have concerns or things that are holding you up so far? Or I see a big thumbs up from David. That's good. Oh, there's Clayton Williams. Good. Is anybody having any particular problems? Okay, I'll take that as you're doing okay. And Colton's even figured out how to do a really cool and colorful background. That's nice. All right, so by way of announcements, there's a quiz Thursday. That's our next meeting. And I think what I'll do is before the quiz, we'll have a brief Zoom meeting so that we can, discuss things if you've got questions or concerns. And that quiz is on the PDF file I sent to all of you and a web page as well. So you should be able to look that up, and the web page is just a link, but the file is in Blackboard. You also have, based on the same reading, a blog due Friday at midnight Mountain Time, and given that it's the same reading as the quiz, it shouldn't really be a big event. But I'm hoping this way, by pinging you twice on the same reading, that we're going to inspire some deeper thought on your part. Okay, for today's purposes, if we go to Blackboard and oops, there. Oh, I haven't done that. Hold on a sec. Let me share Blackboard. If you go to PowerPoints, there's today's PowerPoint, not a video, just a PowerPoint. And if you go to handouts, there is a Word file called C-Power Fundamentals that may help you take notes for this quiz, or you can print it out, do whatever it takes, but it's there to assist you. But I would urge you to take notes as well. And of course, as usual, what I will do is I will convert this into a video after class. It takes a while because it has to render actually through 2 different programs, so I can post it on YouTube. So this lecture will always be here. Okay. Hey, and Mr. Curtis is here. We have, with the possible exception of Class Silsby, a full house. We'll have to figure out what the scoop is there. Okay. All right. So let's see now. Before we get into the lecture, the quiz on Thursday, I haven't made it yet, but I would urge you, as you go through the readings, to focus on the ideas being presented by the authors. That's one of the difference between a high school class and a college history class, is we're looking at the ideas. Yeah, you got to have the facts and have them fall in place, but more importantly, it's going to be the interpretation as we play with ideas. And I think that's not a bad segue to open up the PowerPoint. And there we go. Okay. So, oops, let me maximize that. So, what is C-Power? It's a fairly complex question, actually. So, I would urge you to think about it in these ways, that C-Power is complicated. C-Power is an idea. You see what I'm doing? I'm taking something complicated and I'm breaking it down into parts. So C-Power is an idea based on geopolitics. Ooh, okay, so what the heck is geopolitics? That's the analysis of geographic influences. And of course, because it's sea power, the geography it's focused on is large bodies of water, primarily oceans, but it can certainly deal with other bodies of water as well. And just for your information, and to make it a little more complicated, sea power and geopolitics are relatively recent labels that evolved between 1890 and 1900, but they describe phenomenon that had been going on for centuries. So there's sort of a label, and there's a lot packed into that label, as we'll talk about today. Okay, so how am I going to do this? First off, I'm going to throw some definitions, and I mean several definitions of sea power at you, because it is not a static term. It changes over time. It depends on the context, and different people have different ideas about it. And then we're going to look at some of these geographic elements, because remember, it's largely a geographic type of thing. And then we'll wrap this up and sort of discuss, why this is relevant to you. Okay. And the first hint is you're enrolled at a Merchant Marine Academy. Gee, Professor Smith, no kidding. All right. So some definitions for you to consider. Let's see if I can get this to resize a little bit. Okay. So a naval officer, a guy named Captain Alfred Thayer Mahan, coined this term in 1890 in his book, The Influence of Sea Power Upon History. The Naval War College is still around. It's up there in Newport, Rhode Island, and it is a graduate program for surface warfare officers. And so, it could be engineers, but I tend to think of SWOs, surface warfare officers, as primarily being deckies. And what the Naval War College is, there's an element of truth in advertising here, is it trains officers, sort of mid-career officers, how to fight wars and how to think about wars. And it's been around since the 1880s. So it's a pretty old organization. It was the first of the world's naval war colleges. There are now many, but it is the most prominent. And they do a lot of really interesting things up there. So if you find yourself in the Navy, and you may end up going to the Naval War College, and it's a 1-year professional master's degree program. So, something to think about. Anyways, Mahan was one of the first professors up there. He's actually a history professor. And based on his lectures, he writes this book, The Influence of Sea Power Upon History. And he's arguing things like, well, if you want to become a powerful nation or a wealthy nation, it's the use of the sea that dictates that. And that is not necessarily an original idea. There are a lot of other naval officers and other thinkers who are thinking about this, but Mahan is really the first one to put it down in print. And it will end up being hugely influential and still gets used today. One of the early countries very interested in Mahan's books was Japan, and they really take sea power to heart. Then they make the mistake of taking us on in World War II. That does not go so well for them. The other nation, more currently, that's very interested in Mahan and his writings is the People's Republic of China. Okay, so Mahan is old, but Mahan is also still current. So important to know. Okay. Uh, Significant. So why is this guy important? Well, he transforms how people think about naval power, especially in maritime affairs in general. Uh, so Japan had been not long before Mahan wrote his book, and still sort of a medieval samurai kind of kingdom. They get hold of Mahan, they build a navy, and they immediately start. Well, what do you do with a navy? You know, initially you pound the snot out of your neighbors, right? So they beat up the Chinese, they beat up the Koreans, they beat up the Russians, right? Are very successful. Another nation that buys into Mahan's book in a big way is a relatively new country that had joined out of several smaller principalities, and this is Germany. And Germany's emperor, or Kaiser, loves Mahan, and he does something very unusual for a German in that era. He buys a fleet. He builds a big battleship fleet. And that's going to make the British very nervous. It's going to make the French nervous. And if you're nervous, you buy a fleet too. And in this way, Mahan contributed to the cause of World War I, part of which was a naval arms race, as people all read Mahan and go, oh my God, if we want to be a great power, we have to have a great navy. And that's the second point there. So Mahan thinks that navies should assert sea control, control of the sea, however you want to, command of the sea, as he put it. Sea control is more recent. And what this means is you get to use the world's sea lanes for trade, because trade is why you have navies, according to Mahan. And if you establish sea control, preferably in a big decisive battle against your enemy, you will be able to dominate the sea lanes, use them however you want, while denying that ability to the enemy at the same time, generally by defeating them in an epic Mahanian-style battle at sea. And then after you've done that, you move to the enemy's coastline and you blockade him until they surrender, because they collapse economically. This is basically what we did to Japan, and then we dropped nuclear bombs on them as well. So there are plenty of examples of Mahan getting it right, but he doesn't get it all right. He makes mistakes too, and we'll go through that too. So, and again, the purpose of these navies is to protect commercial shipping. Oh, hey, that sounds a lot like the merchant marine, right? So Mahan is very interested in the merchant marine, and he's sort of the guy who not only does he coin the term, sea power, but he also popularizes this very awkward phrase, merchant marine, right? And many of you, of course, have had to explain, what the heck is the merchant marine? Well, we can blame that phrase on Mahan. Before that, it was just, commercial shipping, basically. So I think for Americans, sea power is important because it is part of a greater American project, right? We as Americans don't see ourselves as just another country. We see ourselves as having a special role in the world. And that special role has been sea power to a significant amount since independence. And we'll get into that later in the course. Okay, so sea power. There are a couple different kinds of sea power. There's hard sea power, and there is soft sea power. Hard sea power is that naval power element, right? So it's not hard to figure out what hard sea power is, right? It is, you know, I've got a definition up there, but basically it's that ability to reach out and threaten or actually use force against a nation that is getting in your way somehow, right? I mean, I could just read the definition, but I don't want to turn this into death by PowerPoint. And that's the easy part, right? Yeah, you got big ships. It's a big navy. It can reach out and hurt somebody else. But there's another element called soft sea power, and that could be commercial. Read that as merchant shipping, right? There's scientific uses of the sea. There's diplomacy. There's humanitarian missions, and you know, other things sanctioned by international law. So what I would like everybody to do for a second is to each of you give me an example of hard sea power, and each of you give me an example of soft sea power. And we'll discuss that briefly, right? Trying to get you to interact a little bit. And you can do that publicly or privately, doesn't really matter. Somebody, I haven't gotten many responses. Maybe I'm not doing this right. So, yeah, here we go. Everybody publicly and privately. Okay. So one of you mentioned passing near countries' boundaries with a naval ship. You call it forward naval presence. Sounds a lot to me like a freedom of navigation exercise. What the US Navy does in the South China Sea is tries to remind the People's Republic of China, hey, you do not own that water. There is, by international law, all ships should be able to pass through those waters. China's trying to deny that right, and that's a problem. So I'm not getting many responses here. Could more of you respond? Hoping that all of you are going to write one hard sea power and one soft sea power. Yeah, sending a scientific ship. You know, and it doesn't have to be to another country, just the fact of doing international science and sharing it with the world is absolutely soft sea power. There we go. Yeah, submarine sinkings and shipping lanes, definitely hard sea power. I don't know. Is soft sea power supplying armies with supplies rather than troops? Maybe. That's sort of a, yeah, I guess that's on the hard end, you know? So, Class Silsby is here. Oh my goodness, that's great. We should talk a little bit in a bit. Yeah, torpedoing other nations' ships in a trade route, soft trading with other countries. Oh, Coast Guard rescues. That's a great answer. And of course, they don't rescue just American flag ships. So I think soft power is all sorts of humanitarian stuff, and a lot of our alumni have been involved in that sort of stuff. It could be, you know, carrying relief supplies if there's a earthquake in Haiti or a tsunami in Southeast Asia, sea lifting refugees. There's all sorts of sea power, and very often that's more sort of on the merchant shipping end. So there you go. Somebody using an example from the ancient Mediterranean with the Romans fighting the Carthaginians, you know, more than 2,000 years ago. Good one. Carrier strike groups. Yep. Firefighting ships in port. Doesn't have to be high seas, right? And in fact, sea power isn't just about big oceanic stuff. It can be stuff on the Mississippi River. It can be stuff on the Great Lakes. It can be stuff in Long Island Sound. If we were all in Kings Point, we could look out and see the barges moving up and down the Sound. Good. All right. Well, thank you for responding to that. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Oops. Now what have I done here? Hopefully all of you can see the PowerPoint again. Oops. So there are several definitions of sea power. Actually, there are a lot of definitions. And man, if you went to a library or if you looked online and just Googled Alfred Thayer Mahan or sea power, usually spelt as two words, so there's a debate about that, you're going to come up with all sorts of ideas. So here I've got, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 definitions, and they're all different. 4 definitions, I'm sorry. So back in the 1920s and the 1930s, the US Navy had a very neat equation. Navy or fleet plus bases plus merchant marine equals sea power. So they reduced it to a very simplistic formula. Whereas you get this guy, Jeffrey Till, who writes books, textbooks actually on sea power, has a more nuanced approach, I think, and he says sea-based ability to determine events both at sea and on land, right? But it's sea-based. That's really important. And I think that the difference between Till and the Navy is that Till is really including peacetime operations here as well, that it's not just about fleets beating each other up. The Navy, the old Navy ROTC program describes it as a nation's ability to protect its political, economic, and military interests through control of the sea. That's almost a PC version of this definition, because sea power isn't just to protect. It isn't purely defensive. In fact, it's very often offensive, right? So it may be more likely to project rather than protect its political, economic, and military interests, right? So certainly sea power can be very, very aggressive. But writing back in 2001, the Cold War was over. It was kumbaya. We're all going to cooperate in the world. Well, that's sort of fallen by the wayside. And then we'll go to the last definition, which is by a British Royal Navy RN admiral who wrote this about 2014. He talks about this combined investment in the sea of various components and resources of a state or enterprise in the pursuit of favorable outcomes. So what I'd like you to do again is hold on a sec, in chat, tell me which definition you think is the most appropriate, and maybe a couple words about why. So go ahead, let's see what all of you have to say about that. So let me pick up that slide again so that you can get the names. So we've got what? US Navy, Till, Navy ROTC, and Perry. Pick one of those 4 and give me a couple words about why you favor that definition. Okay, so some of you like the idea that the focus is on protecting the homeland, uh, an entirely healthy instinct, I might add, and not bad. Why not? Others of you like Till, uh, and Till's pretty good. You know, he's not bad. Um, oh, some of you like the ROTC version because it, as you say, almost incrementally defines the parts and aspects. That's good. Some of you like Admiral Perry's definition because it's really broad and, you know, can mean a lot of different things, which is a nice thing. But some people might say, yeah, it's too loosey goosey too. Some of you say till, Rotzi. Now, this is sort of interesting. It's uh, a lot of differences, right? You aren't all pig piling on one approach. Only one of you so far likes the old U.S. Navy equation, though, and that's okay too. So, but as you see, there are a lot of different ideas, and you ought to be thinking about this for your quiz and your blog because it's a complicated idea. So people are going to disagree. Doesn't mean we have to be vicious about it, but people are going to have different ideas about that. So good stuff. Thank you for staying involved. Okay, so let's go back to all right. Okay, so, and this is where you may want to get that handout in the Blackboard site. Because Mahan had some ideas about sea power that he called the 6 preconditions of sea power. And this stuff can get complicated, and the handout will help you get your mind around this. What the first thing you should notice is that a lot of this is about geopolitics, so it is geographical. So geographical position means where your country is located. For example, are you on a major sea lane? You know, do you have access to those trade routes, sea lanes of communications, the Navy would like to say. And also, you know, are you an island? Britain was unified as one country, so it didn't have to worry about internal borders after 1704 or something like that. The United States is in a pretty good geographical position, right? Where our neighbors, Canada and Mexico, are pretty good to us. We've been a worse neighbor to them than they have been to us, right? We tried to invade Canada twice, defeated twice. The first foreign capital we occupied militarily, Mexico City. Then we took a third of Mexico away. So we've established a geographical position. And so geographical position has a lot to do with where a country is in relation to other countries. Now, compare that to physical conformation, which is different because it's really about your coastline. Do you have a usable coast? Do you have ports? Do you have one coast or several coasts? The United States, for example, is considered to have 4 coasts. Four. 4 coasts, where did that come from? Well, of course, there's the Atlantic, where I am. There's the Pacific, of course, which we largely acquired from Mexico. There is the Gulf Coast, which we largely got from Spain or France and Mexico again. Um, and then the fourth coast is the Great Lakes. And there's big shipping up there. There are careers to be had on the Great Lakes and some pretty interesting shipping. I'm scheduled right now to go on a Laker in August because I have this strange idea. I want to go to Duluth, Minnesota, which is this huge iron ore port up there on the Great Lakes. Duluth, Minnesota, 1,200 miles from the Gulf of Mexico, long way from the sea, yet is absolutely essential to American sea power because that is where all our iron ore comes from that gets turned into things like warships or oil tankers or other things. It's from Minnesota, so deep inside North America. Physical conformation can be complicated in that, before the Panama Canal, the U.S. had an Atlantic coast and a Pacific coast, and never the twain did meet, right? It took a lot of effort to get a ship from the Atlantic to the Pacific. But by 1914, we've opened the Panama Canal, which solves that problem to a large extent. It saves on fuel. It means our Navy can shift from one ocean to the other. It provides a lot of benefits. You might not be surprised to learn that the primary proponent dating back to the 1880s for an American Panama Canal, because the French were trying to dig one at that time, the guy who really got the U.S. excited about this, Alfred Thayer Mahan, the sea power guy. Right from the get-go, he wants a Panama Canal because he recognizes the importance of that for making the U.S. a serious power in the world. So that's a good thing. Extent of territory. Extent of territory is, how many square miles of land you have. And for Mahan, it's better if you're a big country because you're going to have more natural resources. And if you get invaded, you can buy time, right? And so the classic example he uses of a sea power that failed because it was too small was the Netherlands or Holland, which had a huge merchant marine, a very powerful navy, and a fantastically wealthy country in the 1600s. Unfortunately, also a small country right next to France, which was always beating on its borders. And so not a great situation. The Dutch had a very hard time when somebody actually started invading their territory because they couldn't swap territory for time. The US, on the other hand, we're a pretty big nation. We've got a lot of land, and really the interesting thing about us as a country is we're expanding from when we're a new country until 1890, when the US Census Bureau declares that the frontier is closed in the continental United States. The nation was settled, in other words, the lower 48 anyways. 1890 is also the same year that Mahan writes his book, right? So, things kind of come together with that. For a lot of this class, we're going to be talking about the growth of the American extent of territory and developing it. Mahan also is interested in number of population, not just any old people. He's interested in a maritime population. Do you have people who are interested in the sea, people who run shipyards, people who run maritime shipping, people who are fishermen or others? So that's a really important asset if you want to be a sea power. Now, most people would say that actually the United States has sort of a problem here. We're not really a maritime people. We're a nation of beef eaters, basically, right? We like cattle, we like steak. We're not fish eaters for the most part. Uh, so, but the United States wants us to be a sea power. So one of the ways they do that involves you guys and what you're doing right now. And what you're doing right now is you're attending, at no financial cost to yourself, the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. And think about this. You all know there are 5 service academies, right? Yeah, okay. But 3 of those have something to do with sea power, right? The oldest of those is the Naval Academy, which does sort of power projection stuff these days. The second is the Coast Guard Academy, which is really sort of about policing the seas and search and rescue too, but sort of what you could call a constabulary force, which means sort of a heavily armed police force. And of course, the Coast Guard's actually bigger than most of the navies in the world. So, and it's a fine service. And then, last of all, the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. So I think that's worth thinking about for a second. Yeah, there you go, Bert. Raise your fist. Yeah, damn the submarines, right? This is a way the government gets young people to engage with sea power when ordinarily, you'd be going to college on a football scholarship, or you'd be going to study law or something, a nice, safe, shoreside occupation. But the Navy is, not the Navy, the government is offering you this pretty interesting opportunity. And so you are really already part of the sea power formula, and worth thinking about. Okay, character of people. Mahan thought that not only do you need this maritime population, but it needs to be a society deeply engaged with trade. We could call it capitalist if you want, but certainly a society engaged in markets, which is the same reason to want to go to sea, right? Is to go make money, right? And lots of it, hopefully. And furthermore, this should be a society not dominated by, aristocrats or kings or emperors. It should be sort of a middle class society that is very interested in the sea as a means of improving its material wealth. And that rolls into the next and the last of these 6 preconditions, the character of the government, which Mahan says that democracies are much better at being sea powers than monarchies or dictatorships or communist totalitarian governments. Why is that? Because they are reflecting the will of the people who want to engage in maritime trade, and that the people are directing this government to promote that. That monarchies or dictatorships, sure, they can build up navies, but boy, a king dies and, his heir isn't so interested in ships, and so that can go away. Whereas if you're in a democracy and the people are really interested in sea power, you're really much more likely to have a consistent interest in sea power and promoting it over time. Because, of course, it's expensive, right? You got to pay taxes and stuff to support, build fleets and all that stuff. So there is more about that in that handout. Just a bulleted list that I think will help you get your mind around some of these ideas. And some of his ideas are kind of crazy. One of his ideas is that, and it doesn't really apply to the United States. One of his ideas is that France never became a great sea power for a couple reasons. For starters, its physical conformation is bad. France has an Atlantic coast and it has a Mediterranean coast. and it's hard to connect the two. So it was always hard for them to concentrate their naval fleets. But the really odd thing he says about France is it's too nice to be a sea power. That is to say, France has wonderful agriculture and vineyards, and it's just a beautiful place to live. You'd be nuts to go to sea, which is a really harsh existence. No, you're going to stay in France because it's a nice place to be. Whereas, you know, if you live in Britain, it's cold, it's rainy, it's wet, you're surrounded by the ocean anyways. Yeah, maybe you're going to have to reach out and go to sea to pursue sea power. So some of this stuff is quirky, shall we say. All right, so a few more geographic terms to throw in there. The Navy likes to use this term. In fact, it's one of the reasons why we teach this course. It's all about sea lanes of communication, right? Mahan had this idea that the sea was a great highway, or as he preferred to call it, a great common. A common is a big green area that a village would share in common. Nobody owned it. You could graze your sheep there or do other things in common. And that sea lanes represent these sort of paths that people would create on this common. He believed that governments, if they wanted to be a sea power, had to have these overseas coaling stations, fueling stations, if you will, or bases, or you could call them colonies, and that these bases should be located near key choke points. So let's see, let's go to and see if you all can name a choke point in chat. What is a maritime choke point? Can you name one? Gibraltar, great. Entrance to the Mediterranean. British held, and during the height of the British Empire, they also held the only other exit from there, which was the Suez Canal. Some people say Panama Canal. Absolutely. It is an artificial choke point, and we placed bases to defend it. That base, one of those bases used to be commanded by Admiral Busby, now the maritime administrator. That base is Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. That base was built as a coaling station to fuel the fleets that would defend the approaches to the Panama Canal. Bering Strait off Alaska, yes, and more so recently as the Arctic ice retreats and there is the possibility of a Russian fleet coming through there. Singapore, Malacca Straits, very, very busy, very important choke point. Straits of Hormuz, another good one. Istanbul, between the Black Sea and the Med. Suez Canal, good. Malacca Straits. Danish Straits made Denmark very rich because they used to tax everybody going through it. So that's a good. West Point. Well, sort of. It certainly is a choke point on the Hudson River, which is an important body of water. So there. The Denmark Strait is interesting. That's between Greenland and Iceland, and of course that is where the German battleship Bismarck came out and hammered the British in a battle, sank HMS Hood. So good answers. You guys are engineers, so I'm going to hold your geographic knowledge. I'm going to assume isn't that great. What always confuses me is when the dechies don't really know geographic information. I'm like, this is what you guys do. It's charts and stuff. How come you don't know this stuff? But you guys are on the ball. Okay, that's good. That gives me confidence. Okay, so let's see. I think we've got to go back to the PowerPoint a little bit more. The Isthmian Canal. That's the Panama Canal. Same thing. Key choke point. Really makes the U.S. a world player when we develop that and finish it in 1914. So good one. All right, let's see. Oh, hold on. Okay. So to conclude, the definition of sea power shifts over time and with circumstances, right? It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Mahan captured an existing idea about sea power. He didn't invent it, but he's the one who publishes about it. So he becomes very influential. Some people in the Navy refer to him not as Mahan, but as Saint Mahan. There is a huge building at the Naval Academy, Mahan Hall, for all sorts of good reasons. He was an alumni of the Naval Academy. Uh, and then finally, a lot of the sea power stuff is about geography, choke points and coastlines and physical conformation and all that stuff. So good. All right. I think that is pretty much what I have to say. Do any of you have any questions or concerns? Just unmute and fire away.
I have a question.
Okay.
The PDF you said the study for the quiz Thursday. Did you email that to us, or is that also on Blackboard?
Both. Yeah,
Okay.
I try to give you every opportunity to find it. So I emailed it to you as an attachment, and it's also on Blackboard.
Thank you.
And I think it's under the button readings or something clever like that. Shouldn't be hard to find. Anybody else?
Yes, sir. So you said there was also a link for the reading, or is it just that PDF?
No, there's a link to Naval History and Heritage Command with a brief article, and that was in the email as well. If you all need me to send you that link again, I will. Has anybody found that link yet?
I'm looking at the email right now, and it has the syllabus, the Mahanian world, and that's it.
Okay, there isn't a link there. So, okay, I will send you, and I'm writing this down so I don't mess it up, send link to class. Okay, so I will do that, and no problem. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, so you want to get on top of this reading, and that's what I have to say for today. If Pla Silsby and Evan Zverev could stay behind and unmute and let me see your faces, and we'll chat for a second. Nothing serious, you're not in trouble or anything, but we need to get you caught up a little bit here. Hey, thanks for listening, folks. Thanks for your participation. I think the more you participate, the happier you'll be. And I'm pretty pleased, actually, with what you guys are doing so far. So most of you, oh, hey, somebody found the link. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. That's all good stuff. So we'll talk to you on Thursday, because I will talk to you first before the quiz. Need to talk to Pla Silsby and Zverev. The rest of you can enjoy the rest of your day, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
Take care.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hey, guys. Hey, Evan, can you show your face, or do you not have that capability where you're at? You're working on it? Well, okay. So I'm not going to sweat it. So anyways, I'm I was worried about you guys. I was wondering where you were because I didn't have any communication. So the deal is that I record all these presentations, so you can find yesterday's class on YouTube. Sorry, I'm using so many platforms these days. It's getting hard to track it. So you can just log into that, leave a comment below so I know you read it. And it's as easy as that. And I guess the other thing is, gee, you might have some questions for me since you didn't have the benefit of yesterday. Is there anything I can answer for you?
I think just looking through Blackboard, I've answered all of my own questions. I started looking at the YouTube video before one of my earlier classes. I haven't finished it yet, though.
Okay.
I'll comment.
No worries. And hey, where are you, by the way?
I'm in New Jersey right now.
Okay. So you are an Eastern.
Yeah, there was a little mistake yesterday with the time.
It happens, right? It's been wacky. So what can I say? Hey, Evan, how about you? Where are you located?
I'm in Seattle, on the West Coast. So I was
So you are Pacific. Okay.
Yes.
And how are you doing technologically? I don't see your face. Is that on
Yeah.
purpose?
What's it called? So I guess the school laptops, you can't, if you don't have Google Chrome installed, you can't use Zoom. And so I'm trying to figure it out on my phone, but it's really hard to use it on your phone because you can't really look at the slides and like everything that's on the PowerPoint. It's honestly really, really a bad setup that I have right now because I can't use my school laptop for Zoom.
Okay.
And I don't have another computer to use.
Well,
so.
that's good to know. So now to extend you maximum mercy and try and dial things back. So the Academy is trying to get licenses for Zoom and not use the cheesy, cheap version. So hopefully that will help you out. Might want to try a different browser too. Might behave differently.
Yeah, I think we have a free period right now, so I'm about to do it again and try to see what I could figure out, but they haven't been very helpful with it before. So
I've been at the Academy since 2003. My confidence in the system is shaky at best. Mr. Klaus Silsby, nice beard. That's pretty quick.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So that's not. I'm not that kind of head cold. Let's. You guys stay in touch. If you get confused, send me an email. That link is there in the chat. So hopefully you can find it. I will email it to you just through an abundance of caution. And I wish you well. I think this can be a pretty fun course actually. So and I happen to like working with engineers for some reason. I think you guys just are a little more analytical than your and I guess that's why. I don't know. But anyways, so I'll have fun anyway. So you guys be well. I'll get this video up. It takes a while to render is the problem. And you're all set. Thanks for showing up. I really was worried about you.
Thank you, sir.
Have a great day.
All right. You guys take care.